Today's highlighted coin is the 2025 Jubilee. The Jubilee Revolution, reclaiming financial freedom from banksters. Chris's 2025 coin, Jubilee, defines his desire for men to be free from the debt and death paradigm based on usury. He views the banksters' required interest payments on their loans as fundamentally unethical, whether the loans are for businesses, home mortgages, schooling, or just for personal use. Sure, it sounds great to be able to borrow money you don't have for things you think you need, but is it worth the financial risk? How many college kids are now drowning in debt that they can never pay off? How many people have filed for bankruptcy because the banks gave them all the credit they qualified for? How many businesses have failed because they were loaned money despite their poor business plans? How many house-poor people were given a mortgage for houses they couldn't afford and are now unable to furnish them or take vacations? The only winners in these scenarios are the bankers, because they always get paid their interest no matter what happens to their customers. This is the legacy of the debt and death paradigm. Shockingly, the average credit card interest rate today is 22.80%. That legal rate is higher than the illegal rate of 17% charged by loan sharks just a generation ago. And 22.80% represents a huge jump from 2019, when it was 16.98%. How is this considered legal, especially when you consider that 40% of Americans carry their credit card debt over from month to month, and that the average credit card balance in 2024 was $6,730? This rigged game just keeps getting worse and worse, as that $6,730 balance represents a 3.5% increase over 2023. If all of those people never charged another thing to their credit cards and just made the minimum payment each month, it would still take years and years to pay it off. It's an enslaving racket of debt and death, and no one gets out alive. The Bible specifically forbids charging interest on loans to people within your own community. It is considered usury. Leviticus 25:36-37 says, "Take no usury or interest from him, but fear your God, that your brother may live with you. You shall not lend him your money for usury, nor lend him your food for profit." In another Bible verse, Deuteronomy 23:19 says, "You shall not charge interest to your countrymen, interest on money, food, or anything that may be loaned at interest." Loans for business ventures, home purchases, or schooling is one thing, but when you consider how many people charge their groceries on their credit cards today, the bankers have figured out a way to charge interest on your food, too. Nothing is sacred. Exodus 22:25 says, "If you lend money to any of my people, to the poor among you, you shall not be to him as a lender, and his interest shall not be on him." Giving money versus lending money to the poor among us has always been part of the Christian tradition. Usury was considered dishonorable and unacceptable. As a result, and throughout most of human history, Christians have refrained from charging interest on money that they have loaned to friends, acquaintances, the poor, family members, or business associates. In most cases, they expected the loan to be repaid, but they did not demand an interest payment as a prerequisite to lending them the money. Not only did this allow cash-strapped men to advance their circumstances, but it bound the men together through mutual commitment, support, and encouragement, all of which strengthened and improved their communities. These were personal commitments based on trust. When Andrew Carnegie sold his U.S. Steel Company to J.P. Morgan for $400 million in 1901, they did it on a handshake. That's how important honor, trust, and commitment were to Christian men. But as world trade developed and expanded beyond local communities, it became easier to require interest payments on larger loans since the personal communal ties were severed by distance. This became a problem for generous Christian men who couldn't risk their money on a stranger's dreams. Jewish bankers who were not under any obligation to follow the monetary traditions developed within the Christian communities gladly filled that void. These men eventually became the bankers to the world. They not only provided money for commercial ventures, but eventually were wealthy enough to be able to loan large amounts of money to countries through their connections with other bankers. Usury allowed the banksters to become so wealthy that they were even able to finance World War I and World War II. They took no sides and loaned money to all of the countries involved on both sides of the conflicts. As a result, they were always the winners in this rigged game because no matter who won the battles or ultimately the war, they won too. In 1954, interest on 30-year mortgages was 3%. Most mortgages for an average $11,000 home cost the buyer around $4,000 over the life of a 30-year mortgage, with a monthly payment of $45. That seems reasonable for a mechanical engineer who is making an annual income of $35,000. Today, the average amount of interest paid over the lifetime of an average 30-year mortgage on an average house is $143,000. At an average interest rate of 6.60%, their mortgage payment would be $2,715 for the same man who now has an annual average salary of $103,000. Granted, his income has tripled, but the interest rates have skyrocketed. Here's another example. If you put 10% down on a $500,000 house and then got a 30-year mortgage at 6.75%, you would pay $600,000 in interest to the bank over the lifetime of the mortgage. This would mean that you paid $1.1 million for your house, not $500,000. And, to make matters much worse, banks are no longer required to maintain any specific reserve ratio against loans. In fact, as of March 2020, the Federal Reserve eliminated the requirement for banks to hold reserves, such as gold or anything else, against their liabilities. It's now all smoke and mirrors, and you can be sure that when the economic collapse happens, and it will, that they will call in your debt and you will become the sacrificial lamb. Chris's coin, Jubilee, will set you free. Stay out of debt and stack physical silver so that you and your family can survive and thrive. Chris Dewayne issues 2 new proofs each week, which are available for a limited time. These proofs come in a presentation box with the certificate of authenticity, as shown here. They're also available in BU, brilliant uncirculated versions, which are only stamped once, and they come in copper as well. You can check out all Chris's Silver Shield proofs and all things Silver Shield on ChrisDewayneSilverShieldCoins.com.